One of the first things that I thought of when we started this chapter is a TV show that I watched. Have either of y'all watched Mike Flanagan's Midnight Mass on Netflix? It's like a horror show, and I won't give away the premise because it's such a great show. You should definitely watch it. But these people are on an isolated island and they all go to a Catholic church together, but the sheriff on the island is Muslim. And there's a really tense dynamic of the community on the island sort of pressuring the sheriff and his son to start coming to church. And they're like, you'd fit in a lot better. Like the people would like you a lot more if you would come to church on Sunday. And he's just like, we've got our spirituality covered. He's like, we've got our own practices, but thank you so much for your interest. A bunch of other sort of racist stereotypes come up in the show where they bring up how Islam, they claim that it's a violent religion, right? And so that's a pretty common trope that comes up, and it got addressed in the show. But highly recommend it. I think they address Islamophobia pretty well from the perspective of pretty conservative Catholicism and kind of showing the cracks in that kind of ideology. But yeah, ultimately, you're put in the position of seeing how this sheriff and his son are basically made to feel other and made to feel strange in a society of like, it's all white people, they're all conservative Christians, and they're really pushing for them to like normalize and conform to the correct way of being on their island, which feels very much like America. Um, have y'all encountered, for instance, like the Islam is a violent religion trope frequently or before?
I, I certainly have. Yeah, but my community. I mean, I come from, you know, middle class, just white people in Cleveland, Oklahoma. We didn't have, I don't think, any really people of color at my school, and so it was very whitewashed. And because of that, I think people had obviously biases to the point of outright racism, um, using racial slurs constantly. So yeah, lots of negative things there.
Yeah. There was another thing that popped up in the media just the other day. I guess it was yesterday. The actor, oh my gosh, the M. Night Shyamalan movie where the kid sees ghosts, The Sixth Sense. The kid from that movie, Haley Joel Osment, he got arrested yesterday. And while being arrested, he's on the police body cam and he's arguing with the officer, calling him a fascist Nazi, but he also calls him a Jewish racial slur. And it's like, I don't know why that comes up for people, especially in the context of calling the officer like a fascist Nazi. Like he felt like he was being pulled away or like being silenced or whatever, and that came up. But then it followed it up with a Jewish racial slur. And it sucks because that's an actor who's otherwise like very much not problematic, a very sympathetic figure, but then something like that happens and those ugly sort of sentiments surface. He was under the influence of alcohol and cocaine, so that probably helped bring that up. But it's like, why do slurs like that just come up naturally for people? Why is it that Jewish people are like someone that we can cast pejorative terms at, and it just feels natural?
Yeah, I feel like just back to and well, back to like Islam in general, I think like right, they're all terrorists since 9/11. Like they're all out to get us. All Muslims are out to get Americans or white people or I think that sentiment is pretty strong, was pretty strong after 9/11. Especially if you're, maybe not as educated or and you're just watching the media coverage and terrorist groups and terrorist. Um, I feel like that's the narrative that was just kind of like shoved into our face as Americans, right? Like, I don't know.
Continues to be, yeah.
Yeah, and it continues to be. So yeah, that's obviously problematic. Um, and just that whole othering, which is, quite common in the US, pick your group. But particularly with that group, I think that with, Muslims and Islam and, they're inferior because they don't treat their women as equals and, why, obviously I might have a little bit of, an issue with that. But, that's kind of their society and the way they have structured things. It doesn't mean that, I can't agree that I am not, you know, I can disagree with that, but it is kind of their culture. So that's something that, I guess we'll need to be aware of if we have Muslim clients, right? That their
Yeah.
society is structured and their background has been a little bit different than what we have had for the most part in America. Although there's plenty of marginalization that goes on here, obviously, but um, it's easy to like point fingers, even when you're doing it in your own country, but still, like, I don't know. There's a lot of that here. It's just a lot of othering. Yeah.
I had an opportunity when I worked in hospitality to work with, I'm trying to remember, I think they immigrated from Iran, but there were 6 or 7 Muslim women that worked with me in this hotel. And the benefit of just like listening to their language, like one of them sat down with me one time and they know that I'm interested in learning languages. And she was just like helping me parse through like pronouncing syllables and stuff. She introduced me to some great Arabic music, which was amazing. And, the cultural bridging always takes the form of like someone bringing food, and that's how you fall in love with their culture. And it's like, finding ways to like see the beauty in their culture and appreciate their culture. Just letting them know that you have interests and you want to like know their culture in a way that's distinct from like how it's portrayed by our media, I think goes a long way. And for Islam, I mean, that's obviously separate from their Iranian nationality, but like their religion too. It's like you start to appreciate that, them covering their hair, it's not a form of oppression. It's something that they identify with. It's something that they can, take their own form of like beauty with it. And they have like decorative headscarves that they would wear. And they would tell me about how like it's like they have a great relationship with their spirituality. It doesn't feel oppressive to them. But then when we cast our westernized mindset on it, we're like, oh, look what they're doing to those women. So yeah, I think like finding ways to get immersed in it and to like see the beautiful side of it and like have an image that's not like the Fox News, CNN image of these cultures, especially Islam, is I think important. It was helpful for me.
Yeah. I mean, it makes you think of if you have a client come in and they're fully covered, it's a female client, she's fully covered in her, her long robe and her hijab, and then not to think, oh, this woman before me is probably oppressed by the man she's with or her husband, and she's been, subjected to all the. I think my head might automatically go there. Um, but it's like hearing their story, and it's like how have you been brought up? And maybe they do recognize some of that, but it's not our job to say, that's wrong. I think that, you being covered is oppressive and you should be Americanized enough to know that you can wear whatever you want. You can wear a tank top if you want. Like that would be me like forcing my, feminism basically onto somebody's culture. But I think my head would automatically go there, like wondering, because this woman, like, what has she dealt with her entire life? Which there's probably going to be some oppression in there, but it's not my job to decide for her what's right or not right, according to her traditions. Yeah. Or convince her of anything else.
I think that's the distinction, recognizing like there probably is some pressure like suppressing your voice and like your expression, but it's not my job to tell you you ought to be more expressive, you ought to speak out, right? So yeah, it's a fine line.
Right. If she wants to speak out, great. I can help you, find ways to, nonviolent ways to communicate. Um, but like if that's something she wants to do, but that's not something I need to, force in her direction
Mm.
if she's not ready for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in addictions class as well right now, and we're going over biases. Something that the professor was talking about is that whenever we look at someone, and we come up with a conclusion, or we create a game plan or a plan of attack for this individual, to constantly ask yourself, why am I choosing this with this client, and do I have underlying biases? If they're uh, a person of color, if they're a white, if they're poor. I mean, ask yourself over and over again. You can't ask yourself enough. Why am I making these decisions? Why am I going there? Um, and discovering our biases. Um, yeah, because we get input from the media, we get it from the news, we get it from other people, the surroundings, we get it from school. Our education is not biased, but it pushes a narrative of social justice, which I think is great. But we're biased to hopefully, always be searching for the social justice part. I think there may be good biases and bad ones as well.
Yeah, it's like our perspective is skewed toward liberalism, like the idea that we should be able to maximize our freedom, maximize expression, and like have, the freedom to occupy any role in society, regardless of our class, race, gender, etc. And it's a Western perspective. And even though it opens up opportunities and it opens up like people's capabilities. It's like not everybody has been raised to fill that space, and they're probably going to go their whole lives without ever like trying to test that out. Like if they're living within a traditional Islamic community, it's going to be very family oriented. It's going to be very hierarchical. And women, for instance, are just going to have a very different perspective than the Western liberal perspective. So yeah, I'm imagining because I always like to put myself like in the office, and it's like somehow a female Muslim client has come to me for care. Like she saw me and was just like, that's the person I want to get care from. It's like, how do I adequately prepare myself to like effectively deliver care for somebody like that? And I hope they would. That's something I'd like to be optimistic about. But at the same time, it's just like knowing that I'm coming from a place of like pretty like wide ignorance. It's like I don't know much about their culture, at least like in the more detailed, level of things. Like how would I prepare to effectively counsel them? And this came up also when I was reading about like counseling people from just diverse spiritual backgrounds, other than like Jewish and Muslim, but having a resource, like pulling in somebody who comes from their distinct background. So not just any person from an Islamic background, but someone from their particular sect of Islam. You have Sunni and Shiite Muslims. You've got, within those like completely different, brands and cultures. So I would think that it would make sense to ask the client, like, is there somebody in your community that I could use as a resource for counseling? Like maybe if they have, I'm going to use the wrong word, because for me coming from like the Baptist Christian background, which I no longer adopt, like we had the pastor, right? Like you would ask a kid like me, like, can you put me in contact with your pastor so I can better understand like what your belief system is, like what your value system is, like, and how well does that, map onto your personal belief system? So just working within, their own community, working within their own value set, I think would do a lot, and finding a resource that you could consult so that you can effectively engage with them.
And I don't think technically we would, as men, I don't think we would ever have a Muslim woman sit with us because I think it would be against their laws.
There you
Um,
go. Yeah,
not a chaperone, like a brother or something. So yeah, I don't.
exactly right.
But still, we need to be prepared for it.
Yeah, that hadn't even occurred to me. Yeah, that just would not happen. But a Muslim man, for instance, yeah, Sloan, we should really be preparing you for this because maybe you will encounter a Muslim woman in counseling one day.
Most likely, yeah. I would think so, yeah.
I wonder between so the Islamophobia, the anti-Semitism, and then just like otherwise anti-religious sentiment, like what section did y'all feel was the toughest to contend with, just based on like picturing yourself with a client from that background? Like, do you see any of those people groups being particularly tough to engage with?
Yeah, I have questions for you guys, like just around the anti-Semitism, like
Yeah.
maybe some things maybe you experienced. Um, and I know they threw in, there's a resource in here about how, psychology is like kind of foundationally based on a lot of Jewish thought leaders in psychology, like Adler, Freud, a bunch of others. I'm missing my list, but kind of foundationally, it's like, well, psychology comes from these foundational principles of Judaism, which is, caring for others, um, caring for community, um, like kind of as centerpieces of sort of um, Judaism in general. And I'm just curious as far as what you guys have experienced, um, like just in general, like where does it come from? Where's the, like, I know, I mean, I come from the South, so my family is, some of my family is particularly racist. So I would imagine, and they're all in the same bucket, right? Like probably like your family, like they might not agree with Judaism for whatever reason, or maybe they, there's Jewish slurs thrown around as far as like, I almost feel like for Southerners in particular, they see Jews as kind of on their intellectual and economic high horse in a way. At least that's the message that I have gotten through uneducated Southerners. So I was wondering, like, have you guys experienced that in the South, and what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's strange to me because I don't know why there's so much anti-Semitism in the world. I grew up in church, and we always thought that Jews were the chosen people, right? So we, but then again, we think they're going to hell, and I say they think that they're going to hell because they don't believe Jesus Christ was the savior. Um, so yeah, I don't know why there there's the racial epitaphs. There's I hate I guess the the stereotypes of money being cheap, um, every actor powerful, all this stuff. Um, I've seen it, I guess, my whole life. I don't understand why this one particular group of people encounter so much hate and hostility.
What comes up for me is how white supremacy puts white people in this predicament where there's like the legend and lore of white supremacy that we're somehow supposed to be superior in some way. And then you have all of these poor white people who see themselves as like the trope of the temporarily embarrassed billionaire, right? And they're just like, well, things aren't playing out the way they ought to in my white supremacist identity. And then they see people groups like Jewish people who have, come together to succeed through community, and they've like empowered themselves through connection and reliance on family and building each other up and education and empowerment through just like family values. And I feel like they're threatened. A lot of white people must be threatened if they adopt like a white supremacist ideology. They don't fill the role of the supreme white individual, and then they see people doing better. Well, they have to cast aspersions on the other to figure out, well, why is it that the Jews are doing better than me? There must be some cabal, there must be some conspiracy. And I think a similar thing happens with the Asian community. You know, they occupy the role of like the ideal immigrant. There's like a specific term for that, but like how Asian people similarly perform really well in America because their family values and their commitment to community has like empowered them to like build themselves up. And you don't see white people saying like, well done, that's how it's done. You see white people finding reasons to devalue Asians. And then, you know, you get the narratives like with COVID that get cast onto Asian people. It's like they're always looking for some way to devalue a non-white culture so that we can perpetuate this myth of white supremacy that just never seems to play out the way it's supposed to. So that's what comes up for me.
Thing I right now I'm very frustrated with Israel and what's taking place in Gaza. I think 100% that the initial attack should have never happened. The holding the hostages now for a year and a half, obviously active terrorism. However, the amount of innocents that have been collateral damage, I think is a war crime. I think it's a crime against humanity. Um, but if you say that, you're considered anti-Semitic. Any correction of any Jewish decision, I feel like people say, you're anti-Semitic. Why, you hate the Jews. And I'm like, no, I don't hate the Jews. I don't like this behavior. I don't want no one does. I don't care if it was Muslims, Jews, Christians, anyone doing this. It's not just the Jews. But I feel like you can't say anything remotely negative or correcting a behavior without that. Do you feel that? Like I feel that.
Yeah, being pro-Palestine is framed as being anti-Semitic, being anti-Zionist is conflated with being anti-Semitic, which is absurd. It's like being anti-imperialist should be, you know, the accepted position. Like being pro-Ukraine shouldn't be seen as taking any hard stance against somebody. It's taking a stance for like humanity, individuality, and these cultures that are being killed off by imperialist nations. I saw a TikTok recently of there was a famous actor from Game of Thrones, and he's got this great Irish accent, but he's talking about how Irish people really identify with the Palestinian struggle because, you know, the Irish fought off the British for 700 years, and that's how long it actually took to get an imperial force to literally back off and just allow them to have their own language, their own music, their own culture, their own art. And it takes the better part of a millennium to back off a power like Britain. And now we're looking at powers like Israel who have like collaborated with the United States to squash out, you know, Palestine, and the same seems to be happening with Russia and Ukraine. So yeah, it's very frustrating how it gets reframed as anti-Semitism, which is such an ugly argument. It's like, how could you chalk this up to racism?
Yeah, and just the fact that there's just so many, I mean, it's a tale of all the time. Every single like war is almost every, but the majority of wars have been fought over religion, right? And it's like, I don't know, like this is not necessarily strictly, that case, but the foothold that it takes, like it's just the irony of all this violence and bloodshed over religion, right? It's kind of wild. Yeah.
That's I pulled a quote from one of the articles discussing anti-Semitism and Islamophobia that tracks right onto that, where it's like pre-Enlightenment, it was like religious warring that happened. You had the Crusades, and you had, I guess, like prior to that, there were wars fought in the name of Islam, and I'm sure there were many before that. And I'm no historian, so I'm not going to try to get all of that right. But in the text, they were saying, so as the transformation to secular states began post-Enlightenment, so moving away from religion and toward like Enlightenment values, justifications evolved to racial and national fears. So it's like we no longer hate our neighbor because of their religion. Now we hate them because they're brown. We hate them because of their nationality, and it's like a war of nations instead of a war of religion. So it's like maybe the Holy Roman Empire might have been secure in itself for a while, and they had like an enemy in Islam. But once we got past the religion, where it's like, actually, I hate you guys because you look a little different and you eat a little different. It's like we'll always find some irrational justification for hate and conflict. Very frustrating.
Yeah, I don't know. I know you don't follow Oklahoma politics. Yesterday we just passed a resolution in the House going to the governor saying that Jesus Christ is king. If this was announced at our state capitol yesterday.
What was it? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Oh.
I'm sure audio's cutting out.
Yeah, Jesus Christ is king. Every Republican, I mean, it's,
Okay.
I mean, why are we, how is this a thing? Why are we doing this? Just
Yeah.
into the business of taking care of kids and the elderly. And yeah, it's
I don't
such,
even know what to do with that.
I mean, Democrats are saying, would you do this for, Islam? Would you say that Muhammad is, God's prophet? And the Republicans, obviously, they have no answer and they're not saying anything. Just like, that's a joke. Not in Oklahoma. We're a Christian nation. And it drives me insane. With no greater hate than Christian love.
Real.
Maybe some of my biases.
I certainly share some of those. Like I have to check those myself.
Oh yeah. So I have to check them with even my friends. I mean, not even a client. I've got to check them with my friends that I'm surrounded by that still, they want to talk about prayer. They want to talk about their relationship with God, and I just listen. Yeah, I think there's a place for religion, just not.
It's real. I guess imagining, because I can certainly imagine a white Christian client coming into my office and looking for help. And I think I could connect with them. I think I could, even empathize with like the spiritual arguments. But if we got to an impasse where, for instance, my dad is a person who had a very irrational interpretation of Christianity that resulted in like our family falling apart a little bit because he essentially chalked up all of his responsibilities to God's will. And, it took the form of him going without a job for several years, just not taking responsibility for the family and himself, engaging in irresponsible spending, really not putting in effort to like build relationships, and just kind of threw his hands up and like did a trust fall on Jesus basically. And it's like, engaging in behavior like that, where you take a scripture and you interpret it as, well, God's will is going to be done and God loves me. Therefore, I can trust that no matter what happens, it's God's will. So if a client adopted that very like unconstructive perspective and they were in counseling where our task is like to make some progress and to like make some changes, we would get to that impasse. And I wonder if I would be responsible to intervene and just say like, you have a bit of a conflict here. It's like you say you want to lean entirely on your spirituality, but we keep seeing how things are not coming up the way you want. Like, is this the life that you want? Like, do you want to continue relying entirely on spirituality, or do you want to start taking some responsibility back and saying like, I'm not going to let God carry me all the way. I think I'm going to take some steps of my own. That's, I'm sort of wondering how much it's my role to, introduce that conflict to them, or if in fact, like, they want to live in that world, if that's their prerogative. That's tough.
Yeah, it's kind of like a delusional spiritual bypass in a way, right? But you're hiding behind the religion of it, right? And I think for a lot of us in the West, we do have like a deep, more and more of us are having more of we have a little bit of a wound from Christianity, like a spiritual wound even from Christianity. Um, um, yeah, so what I would say is I don't know. Um, I feel like that wound is more and more a thing, and people are separating more from religion because a lot of people hide behind the veil of Christianity, right? They're doing bad things, they're abusing their wives, they're molesting kids, they're involved in trafficking, they're in, blah, 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 blah. The list goes on. Like, and then people hide behind this thing, right? They this thing called Christianity where they're putting themselves on this pedestal and they're hiding behind God, right? I think the hypocrisy is grown so like fast and widespread at this point that I mean, fundamentalist Christianity just really got a bad name. I feel like I don't know. And when I think I read in the literature 70% of the US in 2020 or maybe 2019 identified as Christian. And that really surprised me.
Yeah, we can see like the flaws in the logic of Christianity and how it manifests in hate, and we can see how it like results in women getting their voices suppressed. It translates to like just horrible political policy. Like it maps right onto Republican, like conservative values. But then, if we take that angle on Christianity and then we're like opening up empathy for Islam and we're opening up empathy for Judaism, it's like, I think both of those ideologies, Judaism less so, but it's like there's a segment of Islam that also has some insidious, values, and we've seen some insidious things come out of Islam, and yet like we still have to like keep our minds open. I find that especially difficult for Christianity. I think I'm just too close to it.
Absolutely.
It makes it tough.
That makes it super tough.
Because I would be very eager, just being a part of like the same culture as that Christian person. I would feel way more empowered to correct a Christian client than I would be to correct a Muslim client.
Totally, yeah.
So yeah, finding a way to empathize and open up understanding for a Christian who's sitting in front of me and touting just like objectively harmful values. I think that'll be difficult, and I don't know how it'll go. But yeah, I recognize that that's going to be a struggle for me. I would need a very good supervisor.
What are the other prompts here?
I wonder if it's still in the chat. Dang it.
I've got it. I've got it.
Oh, good.
To say, like, I think that conservative religions and just like the very conservative end of any religion is going to be a little bit problematic, right? Because they're so dogmatic. There's no room for questioning. There's no room for rationalizing, or well, there's a lot of room for rationalizing, but there's no room for questioning like intellectual curiosity, really, and the super conservative end of most religions, I'd say. And I find them to be a little more, I don't know, difficult. I feel like Eastern religions in general are a little more, even the conservative ones at times, but like, you know, Buddhism, Hinduism, they're a little more, there's sects within those religions that kind of support a little more intellectual curiosity or questioning. So I don't know.
They're at least
That's me probably putting those religions on a pedestal because I tend to be more Eastern in the way I think and just non-harm in general. But yeah, so I think that just conservative religion or super conservative sects of religion.
I feel you that I think some Eastern religions tend to be more humanistic than Christianity. So yeah, I think I see what you mean.
I've never heard of a Buddhist like blowing up a temple or anything like that.
Exactly.
I'm sure there's one angry one out there, but I haven't met him.
There is one. I would have to Google it, but that did come up recently. But it's like the exception to the rule.
The second one here is many Jewish and Muslim individuals face discrimination and violence because of their religious beliefs and practices, especially in today's America. In what ways do the rising hate crimes and current socio-political climate impact the mental health of these religious communities? What can you, as culturally informed and empathetic counselor, do to ensure clients who are Jewish or Muslim to feel safe in your office? So, yeah, I mean, kind of like with people of color that may be identifying microaggressions or aggressive aggressions, you know, feeling paranoid, feeling nervous about being in public, you know, anxiety, social anxiety. I think these could all affect, you know, those clients, especially now.
Absolutely. Yeah, showing awareness of that, like seeing how some of the implicit parts of language can, yeah, be considered microaggressions, and pointing that out would go a long way. And in the article covering anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, they had some like best practices for counselors who are going to take on clients within those people groups. They mentioned something as small as like including Muslim and Jewish holidays on your calendar, just being aware of them. And, you know, especially around scheduling, having some understanding with that. They mentioned having access to resources. So being aware of like the Anti-Defamation League with regard to anti-Semitism, the American Islamic Relations Council. That was another good resource. And they said both of those are pretty reliable for offering like training, legal advocacy too. So just having, you know, awareness and access to those resources could be helpful. And something that I could see myself employing for sure, they said creating a safe space for conversation. So if you were to encounter a Jewish client and, you know, as you're talking through, you know, how they've experienced their Jewish identity, they bring up that, you know, ugly things have been said or they've been made to feel unsafe or made to feel other, you know, finding a way to create a community space. So maybe putting them in contact with a local, you know, community of Jewish people who are talking through similar struggles could be really helpful and could really help to build rapport with a client like that.
Yeah. I've seen other things like keeping a your workspace inclusive. So putting up materials, books on shelves, flags, you know, things like that that show that they could be a little bit more comfortable, or that you will stand with them, that they have a an advocate. Um, yeah, intake forms being inclusive there, and then being culturally humble, and knowing that you don't know, you're never going to be an expert in anything, especially a religion that someone has lived their entire life. So just, you know, come at it with humility.
And when you talk about making your office inclusive, I think there's some.
So no rebel flags, not appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if you put up your Palestine flag, like, are you offending someone? I think we have the freedom to express like our love for, like freedom and like the prosperity of places like Palestine. So it's like, even though having a Palestinian flag up in your office might be perceived as offensive by maybe a Jewish client, I think you're still well within like the ethical boundaries to, I don't know, advocate in that way. It's like if you had, a trans flag in your office, like, are you offending a Christian client? It's like, nope, I'm just like standing up for people's ability to express themselves.
Yeah, I mean, that's your prerogative as a counselor, right? I mean, especially if you work for an independent or you work for yourself, it's kind of your prerogative to feel like it's right
Mhm.
and aligns with your beliefs.
Don't think there's a place for the rebel flag in a therapy office, though. I can't rationalize that one.
Well, there's lots of them around here. There's lots of places for them around here. Yeah. Some interesting individuals. And none of it feels welcoming.
Well, hoping you get out of Oklahoma safe, Scott. I'm sure.
I'll be fine. I'll be fine. That's something I am not nervous for my safety now that I'm a grown adult. And being a teenager here was a little rough, but yeah. I don't think it'll happen today.
One thing I wish she had she had questioned us about in these discussions was the impact of climate change. Because I read like one or two things on the climate change thing and climate change counseling. I do think that's probably going to become more of a thing as far as like people being displaced and being stressed and overwhelmed by like what happened in Asheville. And we got some of that in Atlanta as well. I got some here at my house. My basement flooded during Helene. And so that kind of stress or being displaced or your home being wiped out or, that intense trauma around losing a loved one, or I feel like that's going to be pretty prevalent. It's going to be more of a thing in the coming years with the sea levels rising and all the climate change happening. So I think we're going to have more traumatized, all that to say, I think we're going to have more traumatized people in our office.
Yeah.
For counseling. Yeah.
So eco-anxiety.
Yep. I mean, wildfires out west, in California. Now we've got fires in Nashville as well. I guess you guys got some fires going on right now.
That's right.
So I do think that's going to be more of a thing.
Yep.
More and more of a thing.
No doubt. And I think the anxiety comes from more than one place. There's the aspect of being displaced that has its own trauma, which is like sort of akin to like refugee trauma. But then you have the anxiety of like a dystopian sort of mindset that things are just not going in a positive direction, that there's not hope for the future. And if you can't engage with some kind of hope for the future, your prospects for counseling really are not great. So yeah, there's like the existential aspect of it where it's like, do you feel like, you are going to be okay? Do you think there's a path toward being okay? And people who similarly like don't want to have children for the same reason, it's like having that closed off mindset, poses a threat to progress in counseling. So yeah, I thought the article pointing out like transforming like eco anxiety into activism made a lot of sense, because finding an outlet for that anxiety and feeling like you're contributing some of your concern into making the difference that you can, that's transformative. So I think, having resources that you could direct a client toward that could get them engaged in climate activism could be constructive.
Yeah, and disasters and storms affect everybody in a certain region. Like everyone is going to disproportionately affect people who don't have good insurance, can't afford to rebuild their house, whatever. That kind of thing will affect people who are, economically not, in a place
Disadvantage.
that, yeah, where they can do that. So that's gonna, unfortunately, but it affects all of us, right? I mean, if a storm came through to you guys again, I mean, and it happened to come into your area, your whole place would be wiped out, and you can't support your clients either. Like it's literally transcends all.
There's no escaping it.
It hits everybody, right? So unfortunately, I hate to say it, but I do think it's going to be more of an issue for everyone in the coming years, especially us that live in the southeast, where the hurricanes tend to come, the storms tend to hit really hard. It's just something to think about in general with clients coming in, depending on your region. Who knows what we're going to deal with in the coming years. So it's just, there's a lot of that existential dread of like, it's really going to happen, right, to all of us at this point. If these fires keep increasing, these storms keep increasing, hurricane season will be here again soon, like what's going to happen this year? I've already been thinking about it personally. So yeah, a lot of that, I think we'll see a lot of dread in the future and people coming up with problems, dealing with, just general security and safety, like everything, they've lost everything.
Yeah, it's a scary thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to end on that note though.
I am
I'm gonna die.
I'm definitely tired of every single year, every 6 months. It's a reign of a century. It's a 500-year flood. This is unprecedented. Here we're kind of all within the same generation, plus or minus 10 years, and I mean, how many once in a lifetime storms have we seen? I've seen like 15. Like it can't be a once in a lifetime every year.
There's a 9-hour edit of The Lord of the Rings where I don't know if y'all are familiar with the scene where Frodo and Samwise are like getting out into the field, getting away from the Shire, and Samwise is like, if I take one more step, this will be the farthest from home I've ever been. And then he takes one more step, and then they play it back. It's like, if I take one more step, this will be the farthest from home I've ever been. And it's like, it's a 9-hour edit. But yeah, it's the same idea. It's like kind of dystopian, thinking that things are just getting worse and worse. And we just keep getting a new record-setting storm. But clients will be lucky to have us when they hit.
Exactly. I thinking about Andrew, my husband, gets it in his head. What are we going to do? Because he gets frantic sometimes about storms and earthquakes and what are we going to do with our kids? How do we protect them? We have houses on the water in Mexico, and but have a house here, fires and all this stuff. And I'm like, the only thing we can do for our kids is to prepare them with knowledge, education, so they know what to do if there's a climate crisis, or where to go. If the economy crashes, how do we raise our kids if the economy crashes? Well, we just have to give them the tools to be prepared. I mean, what would we do? As adults, we have to keep moving forward. There's no really other option. Just completely give up. So yeah, just giving people the tools that they need. Same with a client. So I think
Hope and self-sufficiency. Good
Exactly.
tools.
Yeah, what do you do though when someone comes in and they've lost absolutely everything? I don't know if I would know how to counsel that. So that's probably something I should think about. Yeah, being resourced in that way and educate myself. Yeah, so that's going to be a big trauma. They're going to have a huge trauma response, but yeah, it's just something to think about.
And in that case, it's all about resources. It's like, you want to pull together like the right, I guess, tools and resources, but also like knowing how to put them in contact with material resources, because that's where the hurt's coming from. That's it's tough stuff.
we're gonna get
I
together.
was Oh, what's that?
Said speaking
Yeah.
of storms, we're gonna get one here in just a little bit.
I see those trees moving. I'm gonna cut the recording here. Let's see.